Hello, Thrive Nation. We've got a repeat guest on the show, Richard Mulholland. He's one of an SA hero that I listen to. I highly respect this man because he's got a voice that just speaks to so many areas of life. This book here is what we're going to be talking about, Here Be Dragons. And I do think that every single person should be getting this book, especially South Africans. I think it talks to purpose. It talks to solving problems. So welcome to the show again, Richard Mulholland.
Thank you so much for having me back. I really appreciate it, Steve.
Brilliant. Just tell us why you wrote the book. I think that's very, very important before I tell you the nuggets. You know, I read it over about 4 hours one weekend. It was incredible. It's simple, profound. And I think it's such an easy read for even teenagers. You know, I gave it to my son, Marco, to start reading and understanding how the young people of today can solve problems.
The reason I wrote it was actually, there's kind of two answers to that question. The selfish reason I wrote it was because it is a lead into one of our core products. So I wanted to have something that would make it easier to sell, the work that we do on the back end of it. And it was actually, I had a 16-page ebook version of it that I'd written before, and I thought it would be more powerful. I had more ideas about it and I wanted to fill it out. But the reason that this all exists in the first place is relatively simple, is that I'm frustrated with two things. Well, I'm frustrated with the fact that everyone is out there talking about telling stories, like, how do you be better at presenting? How do you go and tell a story? Now, first of all, let's use what am I supposed to do with that? Telling good stories is hard. That's why Stephen King is a best-selling author and I'm not. Right, so that's the first point. The second point is that everyone is very, very obsessed with like the hero's journey and who's the hero and understand what's going on, and also that people want to tell their own story. Yeah. And my hypothesis is that it's not the hero that's important. The hero is only important when the dragon appears. That's the first thing, because the hero is just a person until that happens. Yeah. And then the other thing is that nobody cares about your story. Don Packett, my old business partner, he wrote a great line. It's the first 2 lines of the foreword of the book, and it's probably my favorite in the whole book. And he says, there are 2 stories in sales, yours and those that matter. And I think that's true.
Yeah. Brilliant. I found with the book that's really, really important is how you unpack, the hero, you unpack the dragon, you unpack the treasure, you unpack the weapon. And so take us a little bit and sort of define those terms for someone listening there, because I think it's a great analogy that people can just sort of picture when they story selling and not storytelling about this hero's journey and how it applies to all areas of life. I mean, applied it to my 6-year-old in terms of dealing with someone, at school that she's not happy with. It's just such a strong analogy. So possibly define those terms for the audience.
Okay. So the hero's journey is a storytelling format and structure that is very, very publicly well known. Joseph Campbell came up with it in A Hero with 1,000 Faces. And while Here Be Dragons doesn't actually talk about the hero's journey as such, the call to adventure, etc., what it does do is it talks about the main cast. And the reason for that is that I think, as I said, the hero is not the most important person. They're who you're talking to, but it is the dragon that makes the hero take an action. So in the hero's journey, it always starts off with the fact that there is a hero. There's a person out there and they're living their own everyday life. And there's something that is a call to adventure. And that call to adventure is usually that there is something great that could happen, a dragon of discovery, they find something new. There is a dragon of catastrophe, there's something attacking your village. Or there's a dragon of opportunity. There's a big pile of gold there, and if we can get behind it, we win. Now, in terms of sales and presentations, the most important problem that I see is that most people see themselves as the hero. They want to tell their story. But that's not your job. Your job isn't to tell your story. Your job is to sell your audience a new story in which they need you. And that brings me to the next bit, is the weapon. The weapon is you. When you're presenting, you're there as the person that can give your customer or your prospect or your audience the weapon that they need to defeat the dragon. That then means that there are 2 jobs. Job number 2 is that you've got to help your audience slay the dragon. But job number 1 is you need to make sure they see it. And this, Steve, is where everybody falls. People forget that what's big in their world isn't big in the world, and they're not doing a good enough job of shining a light on the problem, the unique problem that they can help their customer solve. And that's the biggest fundamental mistake in the premise of the book itself.
Brilliant. Now let's talk about missing link and put that sort of narrative in there. Presentation powerhouse. You've been going for many, many years. I think over 20 years. Many
25
people.
years now.
25 years. Okay. So we didn't define treasure, because I think treasure is really important, because sometimes they're battling the wrong dragon. They realize that's not the treasure they want. But so possibly define treasure and define missing links treasure and what your biggest dragon is with regards to you and your treasure.
Well, so missing link, for example, so let's say somebody wanted to sell to us. The treasure that missing link wants to go out there and win is we want to move from being a business that helps businesses themselves to being a business that helps businesses that want to help businesses help themselves. So we want to train the trainers. We want to have 1,000 accredited trainers. My treasure out there is that the world wants to buy Missing Link's methodology and to run it inside their businesses if they're a corporation, or to use that methodology to train other businesses if they're a presentation firm. So the obstacle or the dragon that I have to get is that I've got to figure out a way to, the problem is that everybody wants to do it themselves. That's one problem that we got to get across. That everyone kind of likes their own way of doing things. And then the other dragon that we got to get across is that actually people don't care about presenting well enough. So everything you need to know about presenting better is out there in the world, but people aren't spending time doing it. The minimum viable presentation isn't. We have an acceptable standard that is lower than it should be. And that's the real problem that I've got to solve in the world. How do I fill people's gas tanks, their give a shit tanks, about presentation more? And so that's what we're trying to solve as a business.
So they're not seeing that dragon. So they're not realizing that their presentations are crap. They're just delivering crap presentations. And they don't realize that if they actually had to upskill and go through your story, they would have greater treasure at the end of the day.
Totally. And what they're coming to us for is they're coming to us for the wrong weapon. And this is a mistake that often when people will sell something to a customer, because the customer comes and says, I need better slides. And we actually now say, and because I wanted to be so militant about it, for 99% of the customers, we say, well, we can't help you with that. We don't make slides anymore because we don't believe that you have a slide problem. That's putting lipstick on a pig. We believe that you have a narrative problem and then a delivery problem. So we want to make the what you say more effective, and then we want to make how you say it more effective. The slide component is a small part of that. What we also, for us, that slide component is also the horrible, sell your brain by the pound, selling hours in your business thing that nobody likes. So for us, we want to actually have the more meaningful conversation and leave that to other people that do that.
Sounds good. Now let's look at Made to Strive, because I've been thinking about this for a long time. My business, health optimization, biohacking business, one of the biggest sort of problems or dragons out there is burnout. Behind that is, I think, sustained performance. People in the corporate business, leaders, entrepreneurs like yourself, if I had to say to you, okay, Rich, in 25, 30, 40, 50 years, you're going to have sustained performance. Okay. Now I'm going to try and illuminate the dragon out there, which I think is probably burnout and too much noise and too much clutter and doing too many things, and lots of different dragons out there that look different, maybe with different heads. And now I've got the weapon that I want to give business leaders, entrepreneurs, whatever, corporates, that weapon, which is me and my company, to slay that dragon. I'm struggling, even COVID and post-COVID, that they're not seeing the weapon that I have to offer. I see their dragon, I see their treasure, but they're not seeing the treasure or the dragon with the weapon that I want to slay that dragon, or they're going to slay this dragon with.
Right. So in my mind, what's happened there? Okay, so let's start with the treasure. So the treasure is, I think it's scaled and sustainable. What's the word? Performance, right? So you want the performance of your organization to scale, you want it to improve, and then once you've got it at optimal level, you want it to sustain.
Correct.
The problem is, what happens is we have a dial. And so the one is, the more we dial up the scaling performance, there is a cost to that. There's a reason the Olympic athletes only run the Olympics every 4 years. The problem is that you want performance year on year, month on month, week on week, day on day. So how do we manage those two dials, and what do we do? The dragon here is that if we turn up the dial of scaled performance, what happens is invariably it gets into the red. Now, when that gets into the red, what happens to human beings? What happens to a human being that's working in the red for too long? And I guarantee your customer, your client will go straight away to say burnout. And say, exactly, that's what happens. You cannot stay in the red too long, you eventually burn out. So what do we have to do? We have to figure out what are the right dials that we can turn to make sure that you have the right level of sustained performance that does not burn out your people. That's the first part of it. The second part is we need to go back into what the world today is important. As you see, in the past, this wasn't a problem because we lived in an industrial society where people were on a production line and people were simply part of the mix. They weren't driving behaviors. So if somebody got sick, you replace somebody in the line and that was that. What we've now moved into is a world of more autonomy. So as a business owner, the biggest single thing you have to realize today is that your people want to be part of that sustained growth and performance. So what happens is your people will measure their value and the business's value based on how they can scale their own performance and impact the business at large. So now what you have is, instead of having burnout happening just at the top of a business with the key leaders, what we're seeing, and I'm sure you can show data to support this, is we're now showing a burnout happening throughout the business. This is a problem that businesses are not yet geared to deal with. You see, what has happened is we are giving more autonomy to our people, but we are not giving them the controls at the top that stop them taking that autonomy and going to burnout. And that's where we come in at Made to Thrive. You see, Made to Thrive's job is to work out what practices can we put in place in your high-performing people. Now we realize that that happens across the entire level of your business, 2 tiers below what it used to do. And we want to try and give you the tools, weapons, and algorithms to make sure that your people are giving their best, getting the best for the business, but not burning out.
Brilliant. So it sounds like I've got to take that on as a pitch. But what I've encountered, and I like the sort of framework of this Here Be Dragons, is the weapon that they want to use is not sometimes the weapon that I've got. I'll give you an example. Cal Newport's book, A World Without Email, and the hyperactive hive mind. And looking at businesses now, and there's a huge move in the States not to use email in certain corporations. They've seen productivity and performance improve. So that's just one example of a different weapon that they can use so that they can get to performance and sustain performance. And when I say that, I should have maybe defined it a bit, is that I want people waking up with boundless energy, being able to perform, not redlining it, having the time off that they need to, having the mix between obviously social, mental, emotional, and physical rest, recovery, and well-being. So it is about performance, but I think most of the corporates would take someone year in, year out who can perform according to the needs that they need to, not permanently, but within sort of every single day. And I've got a number. You can only perform probably at about 4 to 6 hours, maybe about 4 hours. The rest is going to be sort of mediocre performance or even less time for recovery. So how do I convince my clients that the weapon that I've got, okay, is a weapon that's going to bring significant value to slay that dragon to get to their treasure?
So what is the weapon that you have?
The weapon that I've got is what it's called biohacking, and it is self-quantification. So what it is I believe health is going to move into the personal arena. So it's personal accountability. The chasm between doctor and patient is too wide. It's not frequent enough. There's less accountability. The sort of dogma that's out there is that we give pills and medication and we don't look at lifestyle. And that's not for everyone. Obviously, there are exceptions. But what we've got is we want to personalize medicine. So one of the keys we say is put a Fitbit on, track it, get 10,000 steps. If you've got an Apple Watch, get 5 hours of standing and 10,000 steps in a day. Just start there. Okay, there you go. Second would be the second tier would be looking at your sleep. So what I've got a problem is the lack of awareness in terms of the weapon that I've got. And the reason I'm saying this is because I think people can apply this book in terms of what they need to do in terms of the weapon. And I think that's where I'd like you to sort of expand on, and is how do we formulate this weapon that people can see, hang on, this weapon is going to take this dragon out that's going to lead to my treasure.
So in the book, I talk about the idea of a UPS, a unique problem only you can solve, or a UDS, unique dragon only you can slay. The problem of burnout, or so you've got the problem of burnout, and you've got the treasure of this sustained scaled performance, right? What you have to do is, I would, if it was me, I think that you need to convince them, because they will already want to do some parts of it. So, for example, less meetings, less email, less things. But I think there are two. There is, you can't save your way to prosperity. So what you have to do is not enough just to save, you also have to invest. And I think what most productivity coaches have been doing is that they've got the save bit right. So let's save your sanity. Let's have less meetings. Let's have less emails. The problem is that that's not fixing the core. That's kind of like putting an ambulance down in the valley instead of building a fence at the top of the cliff. What you really, really want is to be able to have, because the bottom line is, sending good emails, not the shitty ones, but sending good emails and having good meetings is what grows business. Like, that is where it happens, whether we like it or not, right? The magic happens when humans come together. What we want is to make those humans that are in the room at the time operate at their best.
Yeah.
And I think that what a lot of businesses are doing is they're handling the save, but they're not handling the invest. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't save. I'm saying that what we should be doing is saving and investing in equal measures. I believe what is happening is that you have built the ambulance down in the valley. So you're solving the problem by removing things, but you've not built the fence at the top of the cliff. And that is by basically business proofing your people. And the only way that happens is by managing, their energy, the energy of the individual. And how do we fix that? Sleep, nutrition, and exercise and water or whatever.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, so let me talk about the experience, and it'll be interesting because I think the art of communication is something that I want to unpack now. Probably sent it over our corporate packages, our pitches to say over 20, 30 different corporates in the last 6 months. The two that I got to do a keynote, the two that I could stand in the rooms, are the two that the corporates that signed up. And so why are stages so important? And tell us about the in-person and the sort of online stage and what's happening there and sort of the effectiveness of either one.
Well, let's start with why stages are important. Stages are high authority marketing. So we refer to it as stage marketing. If every single time that I get invited to come and speak at somebody's event, I am now immediately positioned, before the speaker comes on stage, they read out the bio, they build them up, they say all these great things about why they chose them, the speaker walks on, I walk onto stage with already high authority, and provided I don't do a terrible job, if I give value, my authority will grow. Okay. So what happens is I have a few things. I have high authority from a captive audience that is listening for a protracted period of time. So if I asked you, how long would it take to buy, if you were a YouTuber, and I said to you, how long would it take for you to get high authority where people believe you're the expert media for 45 minutes time on YouTube, but at scale? It would be really, really expensive and difficult. But that happens relatively easy when you're a thought leader on a stage. Provided you're doing a good job of making the audience interested in what you're talking about and then holding their attention and interrupting their distraction, then you have managed to do, you will leave the stage with high authority and hopefully with people believing that they need what it is that you do. Okay, so that's the first point about it, is I think that as a business owner or as an entrepreneur or a business leader, we should always be seeking to garnish as much stage marketing as we can. If I owned a business in the SEO space, I would want to be speaking at conferences around marketing, around data analytics, around growth hacking, around all of these things, because I want to be seen as an expert in my area of authority. So that's why I believe that all business leaders should have a keynote of some sort ready to go. If you're not, I think you got to ask yourself, why do I not have a hypothesis about business, about our business, that is strong enough that I don't have a talk built around? If you don't have a hypothesis, that's a problem. You need to get one. If you do have a hypothesis, then you should absolutely be speaking about it.
Okay, brilliant.
So that's part one about the stages, if that makes sense. What's your second question? Was it about the online
The difference
versus in
between the
person?
online and the in-person, what's happening. Obviously it's a hybrid approach, and during COVID, online stages been sort of ballistic. I don't know what's happening out there, other than I found that I sort of land a deal better if I'm in person rather than online. Doing meetings or keynotes hasn't really resulted in much fruit of my labor.
So for me, it's very different. So I will not do in-person meetings anymore. That's simply not it's absolutely not something that I'd be willing to do. I do on in-person talks.
Yeah.
So what has changed for me is, and a big part of that is that our customers are 40% international. If I need to be able to give a client in New York the same level of service I give a client in Big Bay, and that for me is going to be that we manage for the experience that we're getting now. As for speaking, so obviously 2020, 2021, a lot of my paid keynote work was international. Now what's happening is some of my paid keynote work, so I'm doing a talk next week for a company in New Zealand, that's online. So my paid keynote work was online, sorry. But most of my work now has gone back to being in person. So I just go back from a tour of the US, Canada, and Greece. And then I'm now going again next month to Germany and to Amsterdam. And then later on in the year, I'm going to Oman and a few other places in the Middle East. So that has had to happen again, and I understand it. It was easier when I was doing talks from home, but it is still good to be out there and to do that work there. However, I've not thrown out the baby with the bathwater. So I'm still able to have short 10-minute talks that I can deliver to teams that are meeting. Maybe, they'll still do Zoom calls on Mondays, even if they're all together in the office Wednesday through Friday. And I have got these small little lunch and learn thought leadership talks where I come and share one little idea of value in 10 minutes with their team and then answer questions. So I did a talk last week for an organization. It was actually a global group. I presented to them. I presented an idea that could make them a better public speaker. And I got 2 gigs booked out of the back of that. And hopefully out of those gigs will come work for Missing Link. So the ability to do free 10-minute high authority lunch and learn talks has never been easier.
Wow. And are those free? When you say free, you're basically presenting, it's almost like a funnel, and then hopefully you're going to get paid work from that. Is that what something like I should even consider, which I haven't 10 minutes, hasn't even come across my radar, to try and get out the health optimization sort of biohacking keynotes and work that I want?
Totally. I would maybe do a 10-minute talk on one idea that every manager can do straight away to get more out of their people, to get more energy out of their people. What is one thing that you can give? One metric you can track? And I would give a short little 10-minute talk and say, now this is all part from my full 45-minute keynote or my 2-day workshop or whatever the case is. Yeah. But I want to share with you one idea today. And then afterwards, I'm happy to answer any questions about it. The more questions that you get, because remember, when you're talking, you're selling. When they're asking, they're buying. So the more questions you get after that fact, the better. So when I book a lunch and learn, so what my team does is they're trying to get meetings, and then maybe they're going for a big company, and then they can't get the hook. So instead of trying to get a meeting, what they do is they say, well, why don't you get my boss? He's a global speaker. He's spoken in 38 countries on 6 continents. He'll come out there. He'll do a 15-minute lunch and learn for your team. And there'll be no strings attached, but you'll be able to get a good idea of the value that we can bring. And of course, a good presentation can bring. And then usually that's an easy sell. It's a free talk to boost their team. And then I go in, I do that work, and then my team follows up, chases up afterwards and says, okay, listen guys, now are we ready to talk? And they're like, absolutely. And then we'll take it from there.
Brilliant.
Because it's not free, right? It's just, you're just doing marketing. It's just it's not, you're not giving something away.
Sure. Now, I've started with my daughter. She's 6 years old and she loves speaking. We try and give her a topic. We try and give her sort of 1 or 2 objects to communicate to us what she's trying to say. My view is that everybody should be able to express and articulate their unique problem-solving only thing that they can do. Do you think that's the case in terms of training our children, the next generation, in terms of communications and being able to express what they bring uniquely to this world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so my kids both grew up playing Rory story cubes. Do you know Rory story
No,
cubes?
no, I got to get it
Rory's
from you.
actually a mate of mine. It's quite famous. If you search for them, you will have seen them. You'll probably see them at a bookshop or things like this. It's a set of 6 little cubes with different icons on them. It's RORYS, story cubes. And if you roll those cubes, then you tell a story based on them. And you can either do that somebody picks one die and starts a story, then another family member takes the next die. And we've been doing that for years.
Yeah.
And the reason that's so important for me is that in any field in the world, the expert that can communicate will always have an unfair advantage over the expert that cannot. It doesn't matter if you're a data scientist or a molecular biologist or a doctor or a lawyer or a CFO or an entrepreneur, the one that can communicate more effectively will always win. It's just the weird way that the world is set up. Now, that doesn't mean that necessarily you can't become an expert in your field and not be able to communicate. Of course, you can become an expert, but your expertise becomes renowned only when you can communicate it. So for me, I have been pushing my kids in this since they could, is that I want them both to be communicators. My son wants to kind of come into the business, and he's learning the same way that I did, got into staging and everything now, because I want him to have that. But the other thing that I've had him do, which is a skill that I had to do straight after school, is he's a waiter. And I think it's such a great skill, high pressure, learning to deal with people, learning a bit of humility, and also communicating and selling to tables. I think it's a great skill. And so I've asked him to do that for a little bit of a while to get some technical knowledge, and then only is he allowed to come into our business.
Brilliant. I know you got an incredible YouTube channel. We'll put the links in the show notes and that. So I just wanted you to ask one question, or ask you a question. You give me one tip in terms of what you see people doing online from a presentation point of view that you could stop. And I know that's sort of a tough one, but I think it'll be important for the listeners that are trying to present online and sort of express who they are and articulate their sort of weapon that they can bring into the world, what they can do better.
So presenting online, the number one tip I would give you is use the right tools. So if I'm presenting in person, I use PowerPoint. If I'm presenting online, I use Prezi Video. It's very simple, and it's just the fundamental difference is that I'm not becoming a small box in the top corner of the screen while my content is lost. I'm able to present in such a way that my content shares the screen with me. So for people looking at this on video, if I was to present here, if I wanted to go into content, I might come up and show information here like this and be able to kind of take people through things. If I'm chatting to one of our customers and presenting missing links value, I could maybe just go up to the top here. I could take them through different elements of it. I could click through on different things and go through different bits of content, and it makes a difference rather than trying to share the screen.
Okay.
So the way that we typically sell online is what happens is that you're sharing the slides screen. The slide isn't sharing your screen. And I think we need to flip that relationship, because you are the presentation, not your customer. Brilliant. If I'm using PowerPoint and I'm in a tool like Zoom, and I do want to present using PowerPoint, what I will do is I will share my screen and I'll have it ready to go. So it's all dialed in. So I just push one button and it appears. But at that point, I will ask my clients to go to the top of the screen where it says Richard is sharing screen. I'd say select the drop down and switch to side-by-side mode. And now do me a favor, drag the image of me so it's 50% of the screen, and the image of my slide so that's 50% of the screen. And then I can still command human attention, and they're not getting just sucked into the slide gravity.
Fantastic. And let's talk about the metaverse. I know we're coming to the end of the show. I think it's been really cool. But do you see presenting in the metaverse very different in terms of people sort of engaging in that new world at Web 3.0?
So currently, I see presenting in the metaverse as a cure for the wrong disease. I think it's almost laughable in the current implementation of it. The idea of having an audience, trying to make a better connection by turning people into avatars and making them, what we're doing is we're amplifying the bug of in-person. So if you think about an in-person presentation, the bug is that the presenter is far away from you, so you don't have this relationship that we have. You don't have a front row
Yeah.
seat. So what do? Is you build tiered seating, or you put big screens halfway down the room, and you get, delay towers so that the sound carries. And what invariably happens is, I've all been to presentations at a big venue like a convention center where the speakers then presented onto the screens, and you end up spending more time looking at the screens rather than watching the speaker. Now, what I've seen in a lot, even organizations like Singularity, what they've done is they have everybody be these little avatars, so you can have a shit seat at an online event, and that is absolutely nonsensical. We've amplified the bug.
Yeah.
It also, when you understand when you're watching a presenter, we do know that their tone and their body language and their gestures, they're a very, very important part. So, and we're losing those because what you're having is a moving mouth talk on a screen, and most of the work is being done by PowerPoint. So we've cured the wrong disease. In its current form, the way it's being utilized, metaverse-based presenting, doesn't make sense. However, I am deeply excited about what will happen as the technology gets more broadly adopted. As the infrastructure inverts, I think then we're going to be able to do some amazing things, because then you and I, instead of this being a two-dimensional conversation, we're a hop, skip, and a jump away from both of us having our rigs on, and we're having a 3D to 3D conversation, but it feels like you're in the room with me. Like if I fist bump you, you'll fist bump me back, as we're going to do. And I think that is what I'm very, very excited about, the future of the technology. I am not excited about the current application at all. In fact, I think that we're trading novelty for utility. And if we trade too much novelty without utility, people will turn off before they should have turned on. I think we're seeing a lot of this in the NFT space, which is a problem. People have been turned off NFTs because they don't like the current novelty iteration of it. But we've not given it a chance to get to its proper utility iteration. And I think that when we get there, it'll be exciting. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Sounds good. What's in the future for Richard Mulholland? Fourth book. I know you're traveling the world now, doing all the presentations and sort of training people, and obviously Missing Link is your baby. But the future for you in terms of teaching people the art of communication, I don't know if you know, is it David Phillips that I've learned quite a lot from in terms of storytelling, using neurochemicals, the endorphins, the serotonin, the dopamine, and how it works as you're telling stories. Obviously, it's story selling, and that's why I think your book is so important to, reiterate that. But tell us about the future of Rich and the way he sees the art of communication and your role there.
So, I think about this a lot. My personal purpose statement is to live a fun life while provoking and empowering people to make their mark on the world. So my job is, in order to do that, I want to be able to elevate our system at scale. So I want to take all the learnings that we've got over 25 years and to package it into a way that I can impact the most humans possible with an easy formulaic approach to being instantly better at communicating, as such raising the bar. So there's a few ways we're working towards this. One, obviously the business itself is gearing around that. Two, very, very importantly for me, I think you may know this already, but every day from 9 to 10, I have my craft hour. And I only read or listen to or watch talks on the field of presentation and related content. It's not about growing my business. It's not about marketing. It's only about my craft. So I want to read every one of my competitors' books. My job right now is to distill the world's, my short-term job is to distill the world's best information and best thinking. It doesn't have to be my thinking. I don't want to just scale my thinking. I want to scale the world's best thinking, synthesize that into the easiest system that we can utilize, and to create that for the world at large. And then step number 2 is to distribute that to as many people as possible. So all my focus and energy is on doing that right now.
Brilliant. And then just the last question about your own health, your own mind, your own performance. Obviously, you want to maximize it to the best as you can, sustain it. Now, what are you doing currently? I know we spoke 2 years ago in 2020, it's flown, but what are you doing currently? What are you doing new that you've really helped in terms of your brain function? Brain fog hits a lot of people. People get a lot of tiredness. We spoke about burnout. What are you doing that you found out there that's been very beneficial?
Okay, so I'll start with my basics. I have two workout mentalities. I have my core workout every morning that I do to kickstart the day. And then I have a micro workout methodology that I do throughout the day. So throughout every day, I have to have done 50 push-ups, 25 pull-ups, 50 squats, 50 dead bugs, and walk 2.5 to 3 kilometers. That's I've got a target for the week in kilometers that I have to do. So
Brilliant.
I sometimes have less days. I stand on a treadmill and I walk while I work. So that's the core health component of it. I train 5 days a week. I take off Sundays and Wednesdays. I also do intermittent fasting 5 days a week. I don't fast on a Thursday morning and a Sunday because I'm trying to break the pattern. The most important thing for me is that I measure all the streaks I have in that regard. So I have streaks of how many days that I've done those things. I actually just lost the streak having COVID. I realized maintaining a streak was not as important as getting healthier better.
Yeah, sure.
So I took the break, and actually it was probably a well-needed break. I think that there's probably an optimal amount of time before you actually have to take a week off and to actually give your body a break. And I'm feeling a lot stronger as a result of it. The biggest miss that I have, and actually why I bought the Whoop band, is sleep. Right now, my obsession is figuring out what my sleep is. And my sleep patterns are, I'm trying to get better and optimize how much I sleep better, and knowing what the right amount of time is. And the nice thing, and this isn't a sales pitch for Whoop specifically, but there's only one I know. So I'm sure maybe they all do that. But the nice thing that Whoop does for me anyway is that it knows how long you've slept, and it knows what you've done in a day, your output, your effort, or your strain as they call it. But then what it does is it makes me answer a survey every morning. When did I stop working? How much sugar did I have? When did I stop caffeine? And what it does is it's building up these reports.
Yeah.
And it's giving me, sometimes I'm getting these surprising insights. Like one of my friends found out that actually caffeine doesn't impact her sleep. She thought it did. It doesn't. It's just not something, the way she's wired is she can drink coffee up to like 5 p.m. and be totally fine.
Yeah.
But exercise is more effective for her when she does it at the end of the day than when she does it in the morning.
Yeah.
And so that was her point that she found, and she only got that through data. I'm not enough. I'm about 4 months into my data journey, so I don't think that's nearly enough. I've given myself a year and a half to try and build up abroad, so I'm committed without expectation for the next year and a half to getting a good data set. And then I'd love to have a chat to you about it as well. What's your feeling on that? Like, how long before you think these things should be effective?
I think it's a continuum, Rich. I think at the end of the day, I think 12 months is probably a minimum for most. We've seen it with Aura. We've seen it with Whoop. My head coach has got Whoop. I think they're very similar. I like the survey that Whoop does, but I think 12 months gives you a decent perspective, in terms of what's happening. Obviously, different environmental factors like kids that aren't sleeping, small kids, things that break those routines, unpredictable. Pets in the bedroom, those things can wreak havoc because there's a variable that's not being controlled, really. So that's what you want to do, is try and control as many variables. I know for myself, if I eat after 7 o'clock, if I don't give myself 3-4 hours sleep, that wrecks my sleep more than anything else. If I have alcohol 2-3 hours before I sleep, that wrecks my REM sleep and my deep sleep. And then also the sort of analyzing what's important. I know if I don't get REM sleep from a cognitive point of view, that really affects me, where I can get away with less deep sleep. So I think it's good that you're doing. My question is,
I need to do that.
Yeah,
I've not done any of this. I've not done any of that. So I've never correlated. I've never looked at the end of a day between how was last night's sleep and how would I rate today's performance. Now, Whoop doesn't ask me that. I need to do that myself, maybe at the end of a day.
Yeah. Well, you need to do it in the beginning and the end, because at the end of the day, there's certain people, if you look at Michael Bruce's work, some people sort of perform better at the end of the day, whether it's exercise, whether it's cognitive abilities because of testosterone. Some people perform better in the beginning of the day. So for me, I know my metrics are the first 4 or 5 hours when I've woken up. That's my most creative time. That's when I do most of my content. I think those are important in the beginning and at the end of the day.
What I mean is I want to take, because I want to see the correlation between the previous night's sleep and the present day's performance.
Correct.
And what I want to maybe start doing at night is then look, so last night was a low REM night, And today, my most productive hours by my assessment when I go through the end of the day was X.
Yeah.
Or my overall performance, I feel, was at this. My overall
Brilliant.
energy was this. And I want to start looking for the correlation, because I'm convinced they're like when people think that I'm angry, I'm not angry, I'm just tired.
Yeah.
My manifestation of anger is because I haven't slept enough.
Yeah.
That's it. It just makes me a shitty person.
Yeah, no, and I think that's crucial. And you look at those variables where you do an ice bath at night, whether you do photobiomodulation, like infrared sauna improves my deep sleep. I know that. So these different variables you can look at, from eating to exercise to these biohacking things that are important. But I do want to, thank you for your time. Your friends that are in your position, that are not looking after their health, that don't see sort of dis-ease and ill health as their dragon to their performance. I mean, at the end of the day, if I had to say to you, the next 10 years, missing link is hitting it out the park. But in 15 years, you've got cognitive decline, you've got dementia, you're struggling with completing tasks and focus. I think that would be a real concern for you. And you put a lot of time and effort into your health and your wellness and your movement and your air, your water, that is. But your friends that are just carrying on, that don't see the dragon of dis-ease or ill health in terms of the treasure of, health and wellness and performance over a long generation. What do you say to them to really try and get them to see that dragon?
Well, because what's big in your world isn't necessarily as big in mine. So I do talk about that. I've got a talk called Intention Seeking that I do on the topic, and it is to people. But the dragon for me is greed, actually. So the dragon I'm going up to is to say that we're trading. I think there's often a correlation between the more successful entrepreneurs I speak to, financially successful entrepreneurs that I speak to. There's an inverse correlation between that and their happiness. So the higher financially successful most of them are, the higher their stress is. And I think that's problematic. And I think what I say to them all is that they need to have some degree of balance, and that balance comes from defining they're enough. So I think that the problem that most entrepreneurs have, or high-performing individuals have, is they've not worked out what they're playing for. So they don't know when they should be stopping turning the effort curve up. And unless you are the CEO of a listed company, there is a point in which you don't have to make more money. Yes, you might have to grow consistently because the world is a bit of a treadmill, but you don't have to make scalably more beyond a certain point. Like, nobody else gets to define the rules of the game but you.
Yeah.
And I'm saying to people that I believe that they should work out what their enough is and then optimize their health according to that. Because when I have health conversations with most people, they say to me that they don't have the time. And I say, it's not that you don't have the time, it's just that you've not prioritized it.
Sure, of course. People don't do what they value, they do what they most value. And I keep on saying that to people. You might value exercise, but you value it at number 9, which means once a month. But then if that is enough, that's the treasure, Rich. If they knew, say, for instance, they had a net asset value of 3 million Rand or 5 million Rand, and they were there, then the dragon they slay is possibly effort or lack of awareness, or they think Western medicine is just going to solve all problems, which is often what I see with the older generation that have got whatever they need, but they don't see the value of lifestyle changes. They don't see the value of exercise, diet, fasting. They don't see that Western medicine is not going to save them in their old age. Is that a possible dragon?
I mean, I think it is. It's typically not. If I was to say, take an organization like EO that I'm a member of, Entrepreneurs Organization, I think very few of the entrepreneurs do not understand the correlation between health, fitness, exercise, sleep, nutrition, and performance. The problem is, if action followed knowledge, we'd all have six packs.
Of course.
So the problem isn't that they don't know. The problem is that they've not worked out how to make it fit their life yet. And it's very, very hard to solve that. You don't have time to solve this while the treadmill, like if you asked me to read a book while running at a 10 or a 20 on the treadmill, I wouldn't be able to do it. So whereas if I could read a book while I'm walking at a reasonable pace, they're performing at the one priority of their life so fast that they're not willing to turn it down to optimize the overall output. And I think that's fundamentally flawed.
Great.
But
okay,
they're also valuing success differently. Most people value success on money. And I believe personally that you don't get to check the box of success unless you're able to block the, first check the box of happiness.
Good. So it's a treasure problem. That treasure that they're looking for is possibly a false treasure.
Totally. 100%, because they've been given the treasure, they haven't sorted out themselves. They've been told grow for the sake of growing.
Brilliant. Okay, last question. Thank you so much. Is that as South Africans, in terms of presentation, in terms of communication, in terms of where we're at, where do we sit compared to the rest of the world?
I think, by and large, I think if you look at how well South African speakers do internationally, so I think at a regular corporate level, when you look at the average South African corporation or business, and you look at the average business presentation in the States or Europe, I think you'll find that we're pretty much, consistently average, and average is below average. So we're as average as everybody else. Okay. Basically, it's a universal problem. Everybody's equally shit. Okay. However, the average, if you go to the average South African event with 5 professional speakers and you go to the same event around the world, I think you'll find that South Africans actually are presenting better by and large, or beyond what people expect. You'll see that consistently South African speakers at the top events rate better and higher than many of the local ones, because we come across more natural, more friendly, more approachable, and less formulaic, less like the "Hi, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm here to tell you 3 things." That I think South African speakers come across as very, very authentic, and people genuinely like them, kind of like the Australians as well.
Cool. Brilliant. Well, I declare favor and blessing over you, Rich Mulholland. You're an inspiration. You've taught me so much already. And I really recommend people go onto YouTube. LinkedIn is brilliant in terms of Rich Mulholland. So we'll put all the links in that. This is a book that I'm working through with my son and my daughter, just so they can start storytelling and story selling. With my daughter at school, she solved someone else's problem, someone that wasn't kind to her. She solved that child's problem. And let me tell you, they are now friends. That child doesn't pick on her anymore. Just because I said, what does that child want? Go and help that child get what that child wants. And I tell you, it changed the perspective totally for her. She's 6 years old. And she says, "Dad, if I can just help people get what they want, their treasure, right or wrong, it changes the ball game with our relationship." So really, really profound. And I just got so much respect for you. And I think everybody should be listening to you, because the art of communication is, so powerful. And I think it's, I do hear you that we are good as South Africans, but I think as people, our communication skills are dropping. Our EQ skills, our SQ, our social quotient skills, I think are not as good as they used to be. Maybe it's a COVID thing. Maybe it's not. Maybe just digital devices. Maybe it's this digital world we live in, but I just have found the youngsters of today unable often to stand and connect emotionally and socially. So, yeah, I really thank you for your work, and I wish you best. And if there's anything you need ever from Mate to Thrive or myself, we're right here for Rich Mulholland.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it.